Welcome everybody to PGC 2021, where the best teams in the world will be fighting over the coming weeks for eye-watering prize money and even greater glory. My name is Jorisar. Joining me on the desk today are Clover and Hypoc. Guys, I cannot wait to get Ranked Decision C and D started. I realize it's early days in the tournament, but this is where we get to see everyone come into themselves and show us a first taste of what they've got over the coming weeks. Clover, let's start with you. How is everything for you today?
I'm so excited. I mean, as you said, we've really been culminating to this point, watching not only our own regions compete, but just all the other regions. The best of the best for PUBG is here, and I'm just so excited to see how they stack up against one another.
And here are the teams that are going to be competing today. Hypoc, a lot of names here and a lot of teams that haven't played against each other prior to traveling to Korea. So it's going to be a real mixed bag, potentially.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. This really, with Ranked Decision, it's you know, people finding their feet. Obviously, the comfort levels getting back onto land once again, and you know, those kind of teething problems that I guess you know, the overlaps of obviously having a 4-group rotating lobby. There's lots of variables to consider here. So this is the real taster, I guess, to get the event started.
So this is what you guys can expect over the coming couple of hours. We start with 3 games on Erangel and then move on to Miramar. After that, you're going to be seeing 6 games in total today, and we're featuring Group C and D. A lot of very interesting names as well in these groups. You've got plenty of PCS champions going head-to-head as well. Now, it's not necessarily fighting tooth and nail, like we mentioned before, to get that first place at all costs here. It's more about teams finding their feet, almost getting their feet wet in the competition, not necessarily wanting to go all out on day number 1. These were some of the results from earlier. Clover, what did you make of this? We were watching some of it.
Ooh, you know, New Happy had a really good start, but Genji, right? I mean, already dominating. In fact, I think the last time we had an international event, Genji actually didn't come out this strong. So really interesting to see them show the pressure to begin. But I mean, Virtus Pro, that was an interesting finish for them today.
It certainly was. There were actually quite a couple of stories to break down there, Hypoc, from the games early. We mentioned teams are just sort of finding their feet. Absolutely no such story there for Gen G. They almost played it like it was a grand final. It was a superb performance.
Yeah, it was, and I think as well, you just think back to PGIS, and I don't want to say it was disappointing, but there were certain elements that were a bit underwhelming in terms of Gen G. I guess if you look across the event as a whole, so a couple of big ticks in the boxes. I mean, the other ones for me are Liquid and FaZe. I think expectations-wise, it's always very high. But obviously, with this meta shift once again, it's good to see them get themselves on the board, so to say.
So here are Group C and Group D. These are the teams that we're going to be watching over the coming few hours. A real delightful mix, I have to say, of teams and regions here, Clover. Although Group D, a little bit NA heavy. You guys are going to be...
you know, I
we
think
love that.
Just today in general is NA heavy. 4 of the 5 NA and LATAM teams are here representing at KPI,
right?
Dignitas, Sonics, Oath, TSM. You talked about all the PCS winners. You've got Sonics, you've got Oath, you've got Petrichor Road, you know, you've even got BN, right, coming out of APAC. So this might be the scarier group. I almost want to see if we're actually going to see some of these teams play conservative to start out with ranks, right? I mean, they need to play well enough, obviously, as they can start off in the top 16 next week. But, you know, I don't know that they're going to show their hands, especially, here we go, Sonics and Petrichor right here.
Right, this is what it's all about. Look, Petrichor Road, PCS 5 Asia champions, the PCS 4 Americas champions, Sonics. We've got Oath chucked into the mix as well, who we'll talk about. Hypoc, this is going to be pretty heavy, and I'm looking forward to seeing which one of these teams is most likely to hit the ground running.
Yeah, I think actually if we look at these two groups as a whole, I think this is more likely to be a bit of a bloodbath. If we look at, you know, the comparison between groups A and B and C and D, but I mean, Sonics is obviously one, in my eyes, with the highest expectations, the PGIS champions as well. Let's not forget that.
Sure.
Of course. But Petrichor Road, again, don't sleep on these guys. We saw they were capable of PGIS. But I think form is definitely a big consideration, more so for Petrichor than Sonics. I think we have pretty clear expectations about what Sonics are going to bringing to the table this time around.
Absolutely. I mean, like, I couldn't agree more. PGIS, but they finished stronger during that event. I think they kind of had a weak start. And on the flip side, though, through the rest of the year, Petrichor Road really rose. They got double first places at both PCS events. They did really well in the Champions League as well. On the flip side of that, those Sonics are kind of on a 2-year high of winning. You know, they've won three of the 5 PCSs. Excuse me. They won PGIS. There's so much that can't really be stopped from them when they play on LAN, when they play online. This is a roster that is just completely gelled. And I think that is going to make some of these other teams that have sometimes looked down on the NA region even give them a little bit more sincerity, you know, and consideration.
But before we go any further, I just want to say a massive thank you to all of you who are tuning in today. This is basically the start of the biggest event in the PUBG calendar. So really glad you guys can all join us. We have a promotional code here. We've got giveaways. Go ahead and enter that right now. Make sure to let your friends know that the broadcast is on and that some of the best teams in the world are about to be duking it out over the next couple of hours. Hypoc, I wanted to touch on something you said there. Form is so important in PUBG, and there's going to be a form versus experience debate raging all the way through PGC, right? There are teams here that, like Sonics, who are on top, and to be fair, they're on form as well, but that's why they're a target. Everyone's ready to topple them. And you can have teams that won't necessarily come into the tournament with a lot of previous results, but they are on fire at the moment, and they might be the teams that become the surprise packages in groups like these.
Absolutely. I think Sonics is a great example when we talk about form and in terms of having a target on your back. And I think what they've demonstrated to us across the year, at least regionally, is their ability to kind of adapt and be diligent in certain scenarios. So sure. That's definitely something they can bring to PGC here. But again, with the benefit of the rank decision and getting a bit of a taster for the lobbies, how things are going to go down. Obviously, we talked about all those different variables of this mixed bag of teams, and obviously scrims we can take with a pinch of salt, but once we get into these live games here, Sonics have really got to kind of find a lot of opportunities to learn, I guess, about the lobby in these early on games, and that's really going to be a big kind of test really in that regard, because like you said, Sonics, you see him in the kill feed, there's going to be a target on the back, right? This is probably the team that most people are talking about. We talk about the veterans that are here, some of the old names that have been around for 3 or 4 years now, but Sonics really internationally is still the new kids on the block, right?
Very much so. But don't forget as well, we've talked about Sonics and Petrichor Road. We saw them in the head-to-head just now, Clover, and it would be unfair to call them the Joker in the pack because they are very much among the front runners. Oath might have something to say about all this as well.
Absolutely. Oath is coming off a huge hot streak. They won the ESL Masters 2 and Americas. They won PCS 5. They've actually, I think, have had really good showings at every event that they've participated in, even when they might have faltered just a little bit. They switched out after PGIS. Pat Caps picked up Kickstart, who was playing for Zenith. That was another team that did phenomenal at international LAN. And so you've got so much experience with those players. And I think that just the way that they've really come together through this year is only going to make them stronger. Ooh. And, you know, kind of as Hypoc said, you've got so much going on for a lot of these teams. And also, I think some teams to prove. TSM FTX, last time they were at international, heartbreakingly just fell short of the prize pool in that final week. And you know that that's got to be something that's going through their mind right now. And that's the mental game that some of these players kind of need to prepare for, because I mean, you talk about just the good mechanics, the good meta that these teams have, the knowledge that they have, it's there, but whether or not that gets to them when they're somewhere in person is another thing entirely different, something that Hypoc, you might even have experience with.
Well, just quickly, I'm going to come back to the open because talking about experience, I think yes, we can take this year as a whole, but you then look at this roster change with Oath, and again, I think mechanically the expectations were very high, but on a macro level, actually, I was questioning the decision at the start of the year. Again, we've seen them develop massively through the previous format, and I think actually now that plays to their strength. They're able to kind of embrace this fast and loose play style, which didn't necessarily fare them too well in some events throughout the year in the previous format, as I said. But come here, I think they're going to come out swinging, and that's a terrifying prospect, really, when you talk about you know, some of the more seasoned players that we have at this event versus arguably what you talk about international experience, that there isn't a lot outside of PGIS. I mean, Kickstart's obviously played previously throughout the years, and Snake has also, but Again, if you look at the international experience with that Oath roster, it's not that big, and I think in this regard, you're coming off a hot streak that's just going to fare them very, very well, at least in the early part of this event.
Yeah, the number of America's heavy hitters here is absolutely phenomenal. But don't forget, there are so many teams biting on their heels as well. A lot of the focus might go towards those teams and Petrichor Road to an extent going into today's games. But we've got teams from Europe, we've got teams from Asia and APAC wanting to prove a point, wanting to say that we can compete with the best of the best here in this lobby today as well. We haven't talked about them so much so far, but that's because we've got these PCS champions in the lobby. Everyone else is going to be biting at their heels though, Clover, and plenty of teams we need to watch out for just behind.
Absolutely. And I mean, we haven't really gotten deep into it yet, but Multi-Circle Gaming, I think, is going to be another powerhouse to keep a watchful eye for. I mean, just Asia in general across the, we saw A and B play earlier. Now we've got C and D here. You've got the heavy hitters from those lobbies, the second, third place PGC points players that have done really great at events and historically done really well at international. Those are the team to keep an eye on. And again, being United from APAC, just coming off a hot streak from their region as well. And I think that these are teams that, the big question is, even kind of as Hypox said earlier, this is just ranked decision. Not everybody is going to take it seriously. I mean, you've got teams vying for the same positions. When you mix regions like this, a lot of those teams drop the same places, or they like to play the same similar style. Oath, traditionally a team that plays from the north or the east. When you come into another region, they're going to have to fight for that position from another team that might like that. And that's what ranked is important. We're not necessarily going to see the way that teams are going to play in weekly survival week 1, because right now they're just trying to kind of edge out their own position leading up to that.
And because we're not necessarily taking those massive risks to get the win every single game, we're just focusing on making sure we're solid. We want to get into the top half of the table. We want to make sure that we're there when almost the real fights begin. We might see differences in playstyle, like Clover just said, Hypoc. What are some of the things we might be watching out for where we're looking at a play and we're going, a team wouldn't normally play like this, but for today it's appropriate?
I guess it's all the things that we could maybe put under that umbrella of, early fact finders, right? Maybe some circle 2 crashing, feeling out those rotations. And honestly, I think you look at a team like Multi-Circle Gaming. I know we just touched on them, but it's a perfect example. That's one of the teams that you look towards, and I'd probably put, I mean, you could say Oath, Dignitas, Sonics as well. They're not afraid to get their hands dirty, right? They're not afraid to kind of go out and take some risks, but ultimately that's to learn from. And those are the things we look for here. Again, like we said, yes, placement isn't absolutely crucial through these rank decisions, but the learnings absolutely are.
Speaking of learnings, some of the EU teams that we might not have actually touched on yet, to be fair, we touched on them very heavily in groups A and B, right? So totally cool with the balance. But Na'Vi and ENCE are going to be playing today, and they haven't really played against any of these teams prior to going to Korea. It's going to be really interesting to see how they sort of jump in and adapt to the meta when so many different play styles are coming together and clashing. It's not going to be like your regular scrim day or your regular European tournament for them. They're going to have to do some serious adapting really, really quickly, Clover.
I think so. And historically at international events, I think sometimes you do see some of the EU teams move a little bit slower up until the mid to late game in certain circumstances, especially with the way that the formats have kind of changed throughout the year. That said, I think that this might be a good event for ENCE, especially. Keeping an eye on them to see some good scoring. I feel like, I don't know, maybe, it's almost a little bit of a meme, but traditionally at these types of events, I feel like Na'Vi has the most heartbreaking bad things happen to them when they rotate. I can historically think of so many instances, whether it's being chased by a US in a motorcycle or blowing up in a boat heading to military. There's just so many instances where things could go terribly wrong for Na'Vi. And I'm not trying to Nostradam this, but I'm hoping that it just doesn't happen for them this time.
I mean, maybe now that you've said it, we've like almost anti-caster cursed it out of existence, and we're going to see the most amazing
thing. Like she was wishing it into existence there. We got a little passionate towards it.
Oh, I can't. I've got EU representation here. I can't hope for that at all. I want to see them do well. But the truth,
you're outnumbered.
I am outnumbered, and the truth is they're outnumbered in this lobby as well. Do you think, Hypoc, do you reckon there might be? Is there any truth to when you're playing with more teams from your home region, it's easier to adapt, or because you know more of the teams and how they would normally rotate and how they'd normally play, things become a little bit less uncertain and rotations, for example, become less of a dice roll? Is there any truth to that, or is it a complete free-for-all?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's, especially when you take into account, I mean, Na'Vi and Ents are two perfect examples, two very slow-moving early game teams. You throw them in here with some of the Asian teams that have been majority of the Americas teams as well are much quicker to get on the board. And that's the sort of thing we talk about in these early fact finders and learning from these early games. I think Ents and Na'Vi, particularly Ents, I mean, you look across the PCS events this year, that they've actually almost developed into a much slower play style.
Right.
And the thing is, you make these kind of regional comparisons, and there's sort of these gentlemen's agreements that exist within EU where it's not so much we agree not to fight, but things are kind of, it's an unwritten rule, right? You know where teams are going to rotate, and is it worth taking these fights? Regionally elsewhere, that doesn't count for much. It doesn't mean anything. Nobody really cares for where you rotate. I mean, Dignitas is a perfect example of, they love to scrap, and sometimes you look at it and you think, why are they fighting here? And they're like, well, because it's Dignitas, they want to fight. That's what they do.
Why is Honey Badger 100 yards away from his teammates?
Well, exactly. Yeah, what's Honey Badger doing split here? Like it's things like that are so unorthodox, and that's the sort of things that we talk about adapting to in this lobby. And the problem with it being, constantly rotating, these drop spots are changing. That you add to that the circles after that. It's really important to get a good grip on kind of the macro level of these games early on, and that's where the concerns for me come from. I'm glad Martin's not here. That's where the concerns come from Ents and Na'Vi for me, because I think in this combination, particularly with C&D, they're going to have a really tough time, honestly.
Well, we're inching ever closer to game number one, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to go to a short break while the game gets set up. We did have all the players, for example, swap over their boots from groups A and B earlier. They're almost ready to get into game now. We're heading to a short break, and when we come back, it'll be game number one. See you in a bit.
왜 이렇게 춥냐?
추워. 겨울이야 이제.
출정도 이렇게 추워졌어?
그니까. 너무 추운데.
여기 맞아? 이니시 걸리면 걸렸어. 이니시. 같이 여긴가? 여기 맞는 것 같은데?
여기네.
아 여기네. 불러자. 와 밖에 너무 추운데.
왔어?
오랜만.
와.
아니,
뭐야?
아니 살 왜
너무
이렇게 많이
오랜만에
빠졌어?
아니
살 왜 이렇게 많이 빠졌어?
늦어요.
아
연습하고 왔어.
한주 되는데.
1등 할 거야?
우승해야지.
아, 맛있는 거 사줘. 아 저번에 소고기 사준다며.
감사합니다. 루테 형이 사준대. 비싼 거 시키자.
루트가 사는 거야?
루테 형이 사는 거.
제발 나한테 제발 그런 소리 좀 안 했으면 좋겠어.
밥 먹었어?
감바스.
밥 먹었어?
우리 밥 안 먹고 왔지.
밥 같이 먹자고.
밥을 먹고 와야지.
우리 연습할 것 같다니까요.
연습하면서 안 먹어?
아 요새 스크림
조용히
괜찮아?
하세요.
스크림 괜찮아 요새?
그거 먹으면서 좀 합시다.
아 오케이. 일단 뭐 시켜. 오케이.
저희 차돌박이 피자랑
예?
감바스.
아니
사람 건봤어요?
아니 겁나 비싸.
차돌박이
좀-
나
피자.
밥도 안 먹고 왔어 근데.
빨리 시켜주세요. 똑같은 소리.
예예. 잠시만요. 그럼 우리 트러플 머쉬룸 파스타랑
트러플?
콩연어 그라브락스.
머시룸 파스타랑 그라브락스.
네.
네.
혹시 와인은 주나?
아,
그 자주 먹던 거.
늘 먹던 걸로 하나 부탁드립니다.
뭐야, 진짜요?
우리 늘 먹던 거 있잖아.
돈베리뇽?
바로 도와드릴게요.
뭐예요?
뭐예요?
저희 상당감 있으시고 거리감도 적당 있으시고 산림도 적당 있으시고
바디감이 뭐야?
좀 이제 입에 넣으셨을 때
아, 네.
좀 이제 눅중한 그런 느낌?
아,
네. 늘 먹던 거라서 저는 괜찮습니다. 네. 설명 안 해주셔도 돼요.
난 살면서 와인을 거의 안 먹어봤는데.
나도.
근데 우리끼리 술 먹은 적 거의 없지 않나 근데?
회식 때 한 번 있지.
18년도?
나 그때도 음료수 먹었어.
저 안 마셨어, 술?
나 술 안 마셨잖아.
저 아저씨 항상 빠졌지.
한잔 할까?
짠.
아니, 뭐, 허공에서.
그대의 눈동자에
치열.
하지 마, 진짜.
오야 맛있는데?
맛있어?
응.
이 탄닌이 좀 느껴지네.
이 묵직한 바디감.
뭐 아까 하나 배웠다고.
이제 곧 너희 세계대회 하잖아. 그래서
그치.
약간 옛날 얘기나 좀 할라 해서 PGI 때
좋지.
그 추억을 좀
형이 모은 거야?
내가 모았지.
역시
내가 판 땄지.
팀장님.
역시.
우리 PGI 때는 그때가 세계대회 처음이었지 않나?
처음이었지.
아 근데 NTT가 대단한 게 뭐냐면은 오더가 없어서 맨날 싸우고 지들끼리 막 그러다가 대회만 가면 잘해.
아, 배 아팠어?
약간 약 올랐지. 얘네는 갈 때까지 갔다. 안 되겠다 이제. 근데 대회만 가면 또 잘해 얘가.
나는 맨날 스더랑 골드 가고 싶다.
아 진짜 그랬어 너희? 아니 어쩐지 스크린 따면 되면은 루트랑 스타 와가지고 막 옆에서 막
구경했잖아.
형 힘들어 이러면서
피자 준비해드릴게요.
너무 맛있어 보이는데? 아, 씨, 너무 맛있게 생겼다. 이것도 보니까 독일에서 먹은 피자 생각나는데?
아!
가자마자 먹은 거 엄청 짰어, 독일에서.
아니 나는 그것보다 엄청 예쁜 사람 있었잖아.
뭐라고?
예쁜 사람.
아르바이트생. 우리 사진 찍어달라 했는데 거절당했잖아.
아르바이트생 있었어?
아, 형 이상형이 있었나 보네.
나는 여자에 관심이 없어가지고.
난 대회하러 갔지 여자 부르는 건 아니어가지고.
내 기억이 안 나.
그때 아놀드도 왔잖아.
우리 지사장님이 형 친구야.
아놀드 씨.
아놀드 씨.
형은 여자만 봤구나. 아, 오케이.
이거 나도 아메리칸식으로. 맛있다.
맛있다.
이거 맛있게 먹고 1등 했어야 되는데.
1등 했죠.
양보해준 거야, 우리가.
고마워.
넘겨줬지.
고마워.
종주국 전 세계 최강의 e스포츠를 지금 보유하고 있는 대한민국 정말 배틀그라운드 종목까지 이게 저 오랜만에 나온 한국 게임 아닙니까? 그렇습니다. 한국 게임에서 한국 선수들 우승 차지하는데
루통이 못해가지고 그때.
너 표정 안 좋잖아. 빨리 사과해.
소리 장난. 난 근데 PGI 난 우리가 우승할 줄 알았는데 왜냐면 이게 이틀 했는데 우리가 첫날 1등이었어.
그래 너희 첫날에 잘했잖아.
엄청 잘했어.
아니 첫날만 해도 버스에서
잘했어. 엄청 잘했어.
버스에서 뒤에서 막 신나가지고 막 자기들끼리 되게 막 분위기 좋았었잖아.
그때 기억나? 우리 스크림 하는데 서로 기분 감정이 상해가지고
그게 왜 상했냐?
그때 끝 서클 마지막 서클이었는데 우리 이제 부엉 형이 죽어 있다가 나랑 색피 살아 있는데 거기서 이제 막 사플 듣는다고 사플 좀 했는데 이제 부엉 형이 이제 기분이 나빠져가지고
아, 맞다. 아, 조용히 하라고 했나? 뭐 하여튼
거기서 이제
사실 원래 조용히 해주는 게 맞거든. 그 사람 플레이하는 현재 하고 있는 사람의 판단에 따라야 되니까. 그러니까 조언을 해줄 수 있어도.
그랬다가 이제 굉장히 분위기 안 좋아져서 대회도 지장이 있을 정도로 안 좋아졌는데
우리는 약간 둘째 날에 1라운드 때 치킨 먹었지 않나 우리가?
그치.
맞지?
어.
그게 좀 컸어.
그게 좀 컸어.
1라운드 때
기세
먹어서
탔지.
기세를
그때.
탔어. 할 수 있다고 진짜 약간.
괜찮아. 그때 스카 형이 멋있었던 게 우리 내일 할 수 있다. 어?
내가 그랬나?
우리 내일 우승할 수 있어.
나 그랬나?
하면서 막 약간 전의를 아주 야무지게 불태웠지.
야, 우린 뭐 했냐?
우리? 얘가 못했니? 얘가 잘했니?
맞네, 맞다. 핫했어.
왜 이렇게 하냐고.
분위기가 다르네, 아예.
대회 처음이니까 다들.
그 대회 전까지 거의 2등만 했지 않냐? 우승한 것도
준우승만 했지.
못했을걸?
어.
그래가지고 진짜 한 번만 우승하고 싶다. 근데 그게 세계대회였던 거지.
맞아.
그래서
맨날 노래 부르고 다니긴 했어.
나 진짜 너무 좋았어. 근데 얘네가 약간 진심으로 이제 약간
그치.
축하해 주길래 약간 좀 놀랐어.
어.
근데
근데
진심으로 응원해 주더라고. 약간
근데
축하해
진짜 골드 이겼을 때 같이 기뻤어.
그니까.
아, 그래. 차라리 우리는 못할 거 가져가줘서 고맙다.
젠지 골드.
왜 이렇게 술을 먹으려고 그래?
술 안 먹어? 술 먹으러 온 거 아니었어? 맛있는데 난 와인?
브라바락스 보여드릴게요.
형 잘못 시킨 거 같은데?
그러게.
짠. 이거 짠하면은 BG 우승하나?
하나?
우승감? 어쨌든 3인칭 우승이었잖아. 그럼 이제 수도는 1인칭 우승을 했잖아.
그렇지.
그래 1인칭 우승자.
아니 또 아예 다른 경험이잖아.
그렇지. 수도가 대단하네 그거.
사실 우승할 줄 몰랐어. 그때 좀 예선전 때 잘 못한 것도 있고 지금 생각해보면 좀 많이 부족했던 것 같은데 어떻게 팀원들이 잘 해줘가지고 우승했지.
전주제! 전 세계 최고의 팀으로 600만 불의 상금 걸려있는 이번 대회에서 우승을 차지했어요. 2019 PGC 우승을 차지하는 제주입니다.
그때 2등을 누가 했어?
페이즈가 있고 3등을 뽀에임인데 11라운드 때 뽀에임한테 우리가 따라잡혔어. 점수를. 그래서 우리가 2등으로 떨어졌는데 딱 우리가 진행하고 있는데 갑자기 뽀에임 킬로가 뜨는 거야.
제지가 맞았어요.
이거 못 살려. 이거 못 살려요.
포에버 갑니다. 포에버.
이거
포에버. 영원한 거 절대 없네요.
누가 잡아줬어. 2명인가 3명.
아.
나이스 하고 있는데 그때 아마 페이지도 처음에 중앙에서 싸웠을 거야. 그래서 2명인가 죽었던 걸로 기억하거든. 그래서
페이지 클랜과 VC가 싸워요. 야 이러면
자,
VC가
뵙습니다.
이거 매워요.
뭔가 톱니바퀴 돌아가는 그 딱딱딱 맞는 느낌.
딱 그 느낌 오잖아.
딱딱딱딱 잘 되는 거야.
이런 느낌이 있잖아. 이거 각 나왔는데? 근데 그게 돼.
맞아.
그
대전날에
기세가
머리도
확 올라와.
예, 우바가 치킨을 먹지 않는 이상은. 네. 자 이제 우바 선수 혼자 남았고. 우바 정리. 우바 정리. 우바. 젠지 우승.
아 그래서 우승했을 때 기분이 어땠어?
기분?
얼떨떨했지.
딱 이제
얘네는
점수 딱 나왔어.
그러니까 나랑 감독님은 카운트를 다 끝내놔서
엄청 좋아했잖아 너 그때?
이미 경기 중에 이미 우리 우승인 걸 알아서
아, 난 표정이 봤어. 난리쳐.
주체 못해가지고 경기 중인데 뛰어올라 그랬어.
올라가가지고 한 소리 듣겠다 싶을 정도로 뛰어갔어.
진짜
몰랐네 그거는.
아니 근데 카메라로 보였어. 그 표정이.
근데 얘네는 이제 얼떨떨했지 얘네는.
우승한 것 같은데 한 느낌이 이제.
정한이는 좀 그런 게 있었는데 다른 애들은 그냥 우승? 얼떨떨하면서 이제
그때
상금
나보고
상금 생각하니까 아주 기분 째지더라고.
최고의 팀으로 600만 불의 상금 걸려있는 이번 대회에서 우승을 차지했어요. 2019 PGC 우승을 차지하는 제주.
아니 근데 그때가 상금이 진짜 컸지 않나?
어마무시했어.
나는 솔직히
이게
PGI
법칙이구나.
때가 제일 클 줄 알았거든? 근데 그 다음에 상금이 거의 2배가 넘더라고.
얘 그걸로 나 소고기 사준다 했는데 지금까지 입국 탓하고 있잖아.
야 정한이 그거 우승하고 아디다스 저지 산 게 다야. 그런 애한테 소고기를 뜯어가?
뭐 차 샀다 그러더만.
사갔어?
가정용으로.
아 가정용.
아 정한이가 효자야. 그때가 얼마였어 정확히? 20한 6억 됐냐?
27억? 아니야 27억 6억이었어.
그거를 4명이서 나눈 거야?
회사는
그래.
아니고.
그거까지 물어보지 마시고
아.
이 시크릿이라.
무조건 내주도 나누지 뭐
이제
시크릿이야.
나눠줬지 이제.
피자를 포크로 먹으려니까 미쳐버리겠네. 한마디만 할게.
해봐.
너 그때 은퇴했다가 딴 거 한다고
응.
다시 들어갔을 때야.
그 당시에는 스카 형이 진짜 보석이었는데
얘기해봐.
보석. 스카 형 이제 떠나면서 아 어떡하지? 잘 찾아보니까 좀 많더라고. 이노닉스라는 보석, 아수라라는 보석, 피오라는 보석 아주 많더라고.
형 왜 이렇게 울라 그래?
Welcome back, everybody. We are getting ready for ranked decision groups C and D, and there is a lot to talk about in terms of what we might expect compared to the games that we saw earlier from groups A and B. Hypoc, let's start with you. A word that we've already used when describing these teams is bloodbath. We sort of touched on it already. We're looking forward to some very exciting, potentially very aggressive games, perhaps even more so than the ones we've seen this morning.
Yeah, I think that goes without saying. You look at this pool of teams. There's teams in here that just they're happy to kind of fight for what they want to achieve in these early games. And again, I mean, we were just talking about this. What's that video was running? There is that certain allowance for, scrims are all well and good, but we get to these live games and a wonky plane path, a different circle that can throw everything off kilter. And really, you're looking towards some of these teams that are able to, like I said previously, embrace that chaos, thrive in that kind of fast and loose play style. And this group in particular, I think there's definitely some volatile teams, to say the least. So expect a much quicker pace. I know, obviously, there's maybe a little region bias here, but some of these teams are seasoned in those sorts of lobbies.
One of the teams we saw just there, we had a little bit of a look in on KPI Gaming. We could see they were feeling pretty good in the booth. Clover, you mentioned earlier, KPI, of course, maybe a team that some of our viewers are a little bit less familiar with going into PGC. They obviously deserve to be there. They're less